In the brutal frozen landscapes of the high Caucasus, where empires clashed and entire peoples faced annihilation, one man and his small band of fighters stared down impossible odds. This is a story of survival, of tactical genius, and of a war fought not in trenches, but on the vertical battlegrounds of the world's most unforgiving mountains. It's the story of how a general, a rebel, and a ghost held off an entire empire with just a handful of men. So how does an army of a few thousand, trapped in the frozen peaks of the Caucasus, manage to hold off an empire? How do they turn the very mountains that should be their tomb into their most powerful weapon? For General Andranik Ozanian, the answer wasn't to fight a conventional war, but to become a ghost of the mountains. This is the story of how one man's revolutionary tactics in high-altitude combat rewrote the rules of warfare and forged a nation's will to survive. The year is 1918. The Great War is in its final, agonizing moments. But for the peoples of the Caucasus, the fighting is far from over. The Russian Empire has collapsed into revolution, its armies vanishing from the front lines. This retreat left a gaping wound in the Allied lines, a 300-mile front in the Armenian highlands, once held by the massive Russian Caucasus army, now defended by just a few thousand Armenian volunteers. At the head of this desperate defense stood Major General Andranik Ozanian. A former peasant carpenter, Andranik had already spent decades as a fedai, a guerrilla freedom fighter, defending Armenian villages from Ottoman forces and Kurdish irregulars. He was a veteran of brutal mountain warfare, having fought in the Balkan Wars and led Armenian volunteer battalions for the Russians since 1914. Even the Russian High Command, through generals like Yudenich, praised him as a brave and experienced chief who perfectly understood the combat situation. But now, he faced his greatest challenge. The Ottoman army, seeing its chance, launched a massive offensive eastward, aiming to forge a pan-Turkic empire. Standing in their way was Andranik and his Special Striking Division, a small, independent force of hardened fighters and desperate refugees. The strategic situation was a nightmare. Outnumbered, outgunned, and abandoned by their allies, Andranik's forces were pushed out of the city of Erzurum in March 1918. For Andranik, the official treaties being signed were a betrayal. He refused to recognize the newly declared Republic of Armenia, seeing its borders as a capitulation that abandoned his homeland of Western Armenia. He would fight on his own terms. His destination? The formidable mountain fortress of Zangezur. If this critical strip of land fell, it would seal Armenia's doom. In these unforgiving peaks, he would make his last stand, not with battle lines, but with the tactics he knew best, the way of the guerrilla. To understand how Andranik held off an empire, you have to understand the terrain. The Zangezur Mountains are a brutal maze of high-altitude passes, some reaching over 11,000 feet, sheer cliffs, and deep, narrow gorges. A conventional army, with its long supply lines and heavy artillery, is forced into predictable routes, making them incredibly vulnerable. For Andranik, this terrain wasn't an obstacle, it was his greatest weapon. His strategy was built on three pillars: mobility, surprise, and psychological terror. He traded territory for time and blood, turning the mountains into a killing field. One of his signature tactics was the high-altitude ambush. Advancing Ottoman and Azerbaijani units were lured into narrow passes. While a small force engaged the enemy head-on, fixing them in place, Andranik's main force would use hidden goat trails and high ridges to encircle the enemy from above. This wasn't a new idea for him. As early as 1901, at the Battle of Holy Apostles Monastery, Andranik showed the power of a fortified position and tactical cunning. With just a few dozen fighters, he held off over 1,000 Ottoman troops for 19 days. They were completely surrounded, yet they used the monastery's stone walls for cover and inflicted heavy casualties, while the besieging force suffered terribly from the cold. When the time came, they didn't surrender. They vanished. This brings us to Andranik's second pillar, deception. After the long siege at the monastery, Andranik pulled off a masterful escape. As recorded by a young Leon Trotsky, Andranik dressed in the uniform of a Turkish officer. Speaking fluent Turkish, he confidently walked the rounds of the enemy guard posts, distracting the sentries while simultaneously showing his own men the way out. By morning, his entire force had melted back into the mountains. The Turks were left besieging an empty building, saying, "Andranik is not a human being, he is a ghost." Powerful imagery of Andranik's forces and refugees enduring the brutal winter of 1918-1919 in Zangezur. families huddled around fires in mountain caves, soldiers standing guard in blizzarding conditions, yet their faces show determination rather than defeat. His third pillar was endurance and psychological warfare. In the winter of 1918-1919, Andronik's forces and some 30,000 refugees were trapped in Zangezur, facing famine, disease, and constant attack. A lesser commander would have surrendered, but Andronik turned the winter isolation into a defensive weapon. The snow that trapped them also blocked the passes, making a large-scale enemy assault impossible. Their very survival became a testament to their will to resist, creating a legend that was, in itself, a weapon. Sobering recreation showing the brutal reality of Andronik's scorched earth tactics. Burning villages in the distance, Armenian forces moving through abandoned settlements. The scene is shot with muted colors and harsh lighting to convey the grim necessity of these actions. However, this fight for survival had a dark and brutal side. To secure his rear and maintain mobility, Andronik's forces engaged in a systematic campaign to clear the region of hostile populations. Surrounded by Muslim villages that controlled key routes, he adopted a scorched earth policy. Azerbaijani sources claim his detachments razed over 100 villages and killed thousands of civilians. From a purely military perspective, this brutal strategy was effective. It turned Zangezur into a homogeneous Armenian stronghold, preventing Turkish and Azerbaijani forces from linking up and allowing his small units to operate freely. It was a ruthless solution to a desperate problem. Through these brutal but effective tactics, Andronik achieved the impossible. His defense of Zangezur was strategically decisive, preventing the total encirclement of Armenia. By tying down significant enemy forces in the mountains, he stopped them from advancing further into the Caucasus. What Andronik pulled off was a masterclass in asymmetrical, high-altitude warfare. He showed how a smaller, mobile force with intimate knowledge of the terrain could defeat a larger, conventional army by refusing to fight on their terms. He turned mountains from a geographic obstacle into an active participant in battle, a fortress, a trap, and a shield. His exploits were so effective they were chronicled by figures like Leon Trotsky. Many Armenian historians argue that without his iron resolve, the 60,000 Armenian inhabitants of Zangezur would have been annihilated. Yet Andronik's legacy is as complex and contested as the mountains he fought in. To Armenians, he is a national hero, a savior. In 1920, the American journal The Literary Digest described him as Armenia's Robin Hood, Garibaldi, and Washington all in one. Streets, statues, and even a metro station in the capital of Yerevan bear his name. Somber recreation showing the other perspective. Turkish and Azerbaijani historians presenting their view of events. The scene shows historical documents and testimonies that paint Andronik as a war criminal, emphasizing the complexity of historical truth. But to Turkish and Azerbaijani historians, he is a war criminal who led reprisal attacks against Muslim populations. They see the events in Zangezur not as a defensive necessity, but as acts of ethnic cleansing. Neutral histories confirm that mutual atrocities were common in the chaos of the era, and Andronik's forces, acting independently of any government, were undeniably ruthless. Melancholic scene of an older Andronik in Fresno, California, far from the mountains that defined his life. He sits on a porch, looking toward distant hills, his warrior days behind him. The contrast between the California landscape and the Caucasus Mountains is stark. He was a man forged by a brutal time, a leader who believed that only through extreme measures could his people survive. When the First World War officially ended, the British requested Andronik withdraw, promising a fair settlement at the Paris Peace Conference. Trusting them, he complied. Disillusioned with the political infighting of the new Armenian Republic, he eventually left Armenia for good, settling in Fresno, California. He died in California in 1927. Andronik Ozanian never fought a battle he was expected to win. His theater of war was the vertical battlefield. His soldiers were a mix of hardened guerrillas and desperate refugees, and his enemy was an empire. He mastered the art of high-altitude combat by turning elevation, weather, and terrain into his most loyal soldiers. Final shot of the Zangezur Mountains at sunset, the same peaks where Andronik made his stand. The camera slowly pulls back, showing the timeless nature of the landscape that witnessed these extraordinary events. The mountains stand eternal, while the human drama that played out among them becomes part of history. His methods were brutal, born of a desperate struggle for survival, and his legacy remains deeply divisive. But his impact is undeniable. He demonstrated how a seemingly unwinnable war could be fought, and for a crucial time, won, through sheer force of will and tactical genius. Andronik's story is a powerful lesson in how the principles of guerrilla warfare, adapted to the world's most extreme environments, can allow the few to stand against the many, forever changing our understanding of what is possible in war. What do you think? Were Andronik's ruthless tactics justified by the desperate circumstances, or do they tarnish his legacy as a hero? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to see more stories of military genius from the forgotten fronts of history, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell.